gravitas. Seeing is believing.
Vielleicht nur als 5%.
Good morning, Asia. Good evening, America. You're watching World DNA with me, Raisha Sehgal.
And I'm Jyotsna Kumar. And on the show today, historical decision. Now President Joe Biden has officially stepped down as a Democratic candidate for the U.S. presidential race. Now Kamala Harris is the next candidate who's going to take up. Now, what is going on in U.S. politics? Is Kamala Harris now the presidential nominee? We'll be breaking it down for you on the show today.
Right. Also on World DNA, we'll get you news from West Asia, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is to deliver a landmark speech to the U.S. Congress this week as he fights off intense pressure to cut a Gaza war ceasefire deal with Hamas militants. Netanyahu will also meet U.S. President Joe Biden on Tuesday. Washington fears a backlash from the mounting civilian death toll in the Gaza Strip. We'll, of course, be tracking that as well on the show today. But first, a quick check on the headlines.
U.S. President Joe Biden withdraws from the presidential race. This comes weeks after mounting pressure for Democrats endorses his Vice President Kamala Harris to be the Democrat nominee for the White House.
Recent YouGov polls say 79% of Democrats would support Kamala Harris as the party's nominee. Clintons endorsed Kamala Harris, but Barack Obama holds back, saying the Democrats would name an outstanding nominee.
California Governor Gavin Newsom, seen as a key possible rival to the vice president, endorses Kamala Harris to lead the Democratic ticket.
Monsoon session of the Indian Parliament set to get underway in New Delhi. First union budget under the new Modi-led coalition government to be presented on Tuesday.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu departs for the United States. He'll be meeting U.S. President and addressing the U.S. Congress. Protests at Tel Aviv airport demanding action for release of hostages.
Xander Schauffele reigns supreme at the British Open to win his second major title in 3 months. The 30-year-old wins mean that Americans have swept all 4 majors in a year for the first time since 1982.
And we start with our top story. In the biggest twist yet in the race to the White House, U.S. President Joe Biden has finally called it quits as a Democratic candidate. He will not stand for the election.
Right, Jyotsna. And he's named Vice President Kamala Harris to lead the Democratic Party's ticket against Donald Trump. Well, this comes after weeks of pressure from trusted lieutenants, former presidents, potential donors, Democrat lawmakers and senators, and also widespread public opinion. The 81-year-old president finally decided on Sunday morning to pass the torch, as what many called it.
President Biden tweeted a note addressed to my fellow Americans, saying he believed it to be the best interest of the party and the country to stand down and to focus on his duties as president. He also said he would be addressing the nation later this week.
Minutes later, another message, this one addressed to my fellow Democrats, and he says, and I'm quoting here, full support and endorsement for Kamala Harris to be the nominee of our party this year, unquote. Biden recalled that picking Kamala Harris as vice president in 2020 was his first decision as a party nominee.
As the White House's first line of defense, particularly after Biden's faltering performance in the first presidential debate against Trump, 59-year-old Harris is the first woman, first black person, and the first person of South Asian descent to serve as U.S. vice president. Harris said she intends to earn and win the nomination and do everything in her power to unite the country to defeat Donald Trump.
The Vice President and other Democratic Party leaders have expressed strong praise for President Biden for what they called his extraordinary leadership, dedicated service to the United States of America.
Kamala Harris has already got endorsement from former President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, besides 79 of Democrat leaders, as per a YouGov poll. But there is no clear support from former President Barack Obama, indicating a hesitation among several Democrats in accepting Harris as the party's White House nominee.
Well, Obama only tweeted that Democrats will name an outstanding nominee. He, however, did not name Harris. Well, it promises to be a long road ahead for the Democratic Party as it heads into its national convention on the 19th of August.
Now, for more on this, we are being joined by Lincoln Mitchell, who is a professor in School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University and is also a political analyst. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, the first thing I want to know is your first reactions to Biden quitting the race.
Well, within seconds of this news breaking, my phone lit up with people who were Democrats who were just extremely happy about this. There was a growing feeling in the Democratic Party that Biden couldn't win, and I think that was probably true, and that this was the right decision. And additionally, my first feeling was that the next step has to be to kind of circle around Kamala Harris. She has to be the nominee. There'd been a lot of talk about mini primaries and a contested convention. Now, to be clear, Harris has to go to the convention and win the nomination, but it's very clear now that she will. And this really changes the race. The Republicans, I mean, with the unfortunate event where the former president was almost assassinated, and then going into the Republican convention, had a lot of momentum, and this just puts an end to that momentum. So this really shakes up the race.
Right, sir. Clearly, like you mentioned, the focus of the race has now shifted. It is potentially perhaps a Trump versus Harris race for the White House. Now, at least 40 Democrats, they were against Biden's re-election bid. How do you assess Harris now being the Democratic nominee? Who stands in the way, and what are the challenges that she faces?
Well, it's always going to be a close election, right? So I think there's a few clear challenges that she faces here. One is that Trump is wildly popular among Republicans, so he has his party consolidated behind him. He may have a limited space to grow, but he has that. Secondly, Harris has to begin to articulate the story of the successes of the Biden administration, which Joe Biden, frankly, because of his, I think, medical condition, was really unable to do. She also has to find a way to defend against the perceived failures of the Biden administration. Neither the president nor the vice president or anyone in the administration has been able to speak to the American people about inflation and recognize how deep a problem that is for so many Americans, and to say why this is not due to Biden's policies, but due to larger issues. She has to make that argument. I think she has to make the argument about the border, an issue where she's identified. She also has to really channel her inner prosecutor. Remember, she was district attorney from the city of San Francisco, where I am now, and then attorney general for the state of California, and make the case that Donald Trump is a career criminal, and make the case of how damaging a Trump presidency would be, something that, again, she's better positioned to do because she's simply more energetic and articulate than Joe Biden was at this point.
Now, talking on that, what if, so is Harris actually a good pick? Now, Trump can call out Harris on the different issues like immigration, but if any other candidate would have been chosen, for example, any governor of Pennsylvania or Michigan, maybe they would not have to answer as much as Harris would have to. So is it a good choice for picking Harris?
That's right. A candidate from the outside would not have the negatives of the Biden administration, but there's also a lot of positives with Kamala Harris. So first of all, clearly she's qualified. She's not stepping in to a job. It's not her first run at the national stage. So that's significant. She's been in the meeting. She's been part of the process. Has foreign policy experience. Somebody like Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan wouldn't have any of those things. So that's a big advantage. Secondly, the American elections, there's so much going on, and there's often some issue that may not be internationally seen as very important that will become very important in the election. And here in the United States, in this election, that's reproductive freedom. Dobbs' decision made a few years ago by the Republican-dominated Supreme Court is extremely unpopular, and there has been no better spokesperson for the pro-choice argument than Kamala Harris. And if she is the candidate that can mobilize middle-aged, kind of moderate, politically centrist women on this issue, and she's very well positioned to do that, that will be a great advantage for the Democratic Party. Additionally, there's this funny moment because Kamala Harris's poll numbers have never been that strong among African Americans. However, if she were to be passed over in favor of a white candidate, the Democratic Party would have a problem with African American voters, who are the bedrock, biggest, most important base within the party. Donald Trump had to make inroads there. Kamala Harris can begin to turn those inroads around. Suddenly, states like Georgia and Virginia, North Carolina are looking much better for the Democratic Party, as well as Michigan and Pennsylvania, because we can imagine a re-energized African American base, which again is right. Democrats can't win without that ever.
Right. With news just coming in, the Democratic State Party chairs have also united behind Harris. But the pertinent question being is that Barack Obama has not endorsed Harris yet. Why is that? Rather, the Clintons have taken Harris's name as the potential nominee for the Democrats.
Barack Obama will endorse Kamala Harris soon. He's always liked her. A matter of fact, when he was president and Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of California. Maybe it's funny, maybe it's not so funny, I don't know, but he got himself in a little trouble because he referred to Kamala Harris as the best-looking Attorney General in the country. She's a younger woman, and that was probably not appropriate for the president to say that. But he's always had great respect for her. He will endorse her. I think he was not aware. He was trying to be statesmanlike, and the momentum around Harris gathered very quickly. So I suspect in the next 48 hours, you will see an Obama endorsement of Kamala Harris. And it is striking. It is striking to the governor of my state, Gavin Newsom, who was both a kind of a frenemy politically of Kamala Harris. The same donor base, the same neighborhood in San Francisco where they were strongest, a national figure, he's endorsed her. So we're seeing the strongest opponents of her in a convention saying, you know what, we're with Kamala. And I suspect in the next 48, 72 hours, you'll see an enormous amount of money pouring back into the Democratic Party. And this, it's not formal until the convention. We should be clear of that. She's not yet the Democratic nominee, but it's going to be pretty apparent that she'll be the nominee.
Right. Now, really quickly, I would like to know, if it's a really short question. Now, we know that the whole campaign is going to be changing with the Biden's exit. Now, looking at Republicans, now how are they going to start looking at the campaigning start now?
Well, they have a different challenge here, right? Because suddenly, who's the old guy who can't remember names? Who's the old guy who garbles his speech? Who's the old guys whose grammar is all strange, right? Suddenly that's Donald Trump. And they have geared their whole campaign around this contrast, Trump strong, Biden weak. You can't do that. Everything has changed. I suspect they'll go after Harris, try to tag her with all the negatives of the Biden administration. So again, immigration, inflation. The foreign policy stuff is going to be difficult because, one foreign policy is complicated. The two biggest conflicts right now for the United States are Ukraine, where the Democratic Party is united and the Republican Party is divided, and Gaza, where the Democratic Party is divided and the Republican Party is united. So I don't think they'll effectively go after her on foreign policy. Look, this is the United States of America. We have to be honest here. Kamala Harris is a woman. She's African American, and she's Asian American, and she's the daughter of immigrants. And they will go after all that. You will see not very coded racism. The DEI candidate, is she smart enough? Of course she's smart enough. Look at her resume. Is she tough enough? A pretty tough attorney general. But they'll go after her in those very ugly ways. And given today's Republican Party, the racism might not be so coded. And you know what the American people have shown is that they're perfectly comfortable voting for people of color for the highest office, and they don't like that kind of overt racism. So that would hurt the Republican Party, but they may not be able to.
All right. Thank you so much, Lincoln Mitchell. That was, he's a professor in School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. Thank you so much for joining us and giving your opinion.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, absolutely, Jyotsna. We're staying on with this story as well, and it's an unprecedented territory that the U.S. is in. With Biden backing down, Democrats have less than a month before the Democratic National Convention when they must name their nominee for the White House.
Absolutely. Now, for the Blue Camp, a year-long primary campaign has been condensed into merely a few weeks. What happens next? Let's break it down for you. At this stage, to stand a chance to defeat Trump, Democrats need to re-energize their base with a new nominee. Biden has endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris, but the official selection of a nominee will be made by more than 4,600 Democratic National Convention delegates.
The delegates were selected at state party conventions this spring. Now, they typically serve a functionary role, but they now hold the weight of a historic decision. All eyes are now on the convention in Chicago.
Biden's withdrawal from the race is not merely unusual. It is unprecedented in modern American politics. The country is in uncharted territory. Never in modern history has a U.S. presidential candidate abandoned his campaign so close to a national convention after sweeping through the presidential primaries. There is no precedent or historical record to consult.
And so far, the party's rules reveal no clear ground on what will unfold next. Well, Harris is an early favorite to replace Biden, especially after the president's endorsement. But challengers seeking the Democratic nomination could emerge in the coming few days.
California Governor Gavin Newsom, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, they have all been floated as possible replacements. The Democratic delegates are now free agents. They can vote for any candidate of their choice. Even Biden's endorsement cannot force them to follow his lead. The question is, could a Harris challenger win over the delegates?
After U.S. President Joe Biden pulled out of his re-election bid, some Republicans called on the 81-year-old to resign from the presidency too.
Absolutely. Biden said in his statement that he will stand down from the presidential race and focus solely on fulfilling duties as president for the remainder of his term. Among the tall voices seeking Biden's resignation is the Republican Party's presidential nominee, former President Donald Trump.
On social media, Trump claimed that Biden wanted to drop out ever since June 27th, the night of the CNN debate. He labeled it as the big moment in Biden's demise. He said, and I'm quoting him here, that was the point in time when Joe was revealed for what he is, an incompetent man who should never have been the president. Joe Biden is not fit to serve. He is destroying our country, unquote.
Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, mirrored his comment. Vance asked how Biden can justify remaining president after ending his re-election bid. The vice presidential nominee also put in a special word of praise for the presidential nominee. He said, and I quote, not running for re-election would be a clear admission that President Trump was right all along about Biden not being mentally fit enough to serve as commander-in-chief. There's no middle ground.
While many Democrats call on Biden to withdraw from the 2024 race, none have pushed him to quit the presidency early. Former President Barack Obama called Biden one of America's most consequential presidents. Obama hailed his great friend and partner, saying that his decision reminded that he's a patriot of the highest order. He said, and I'm quoting him here, Joe understands better than anyone the stakes in this election, how everything he has fought for throughout this life and everything that the Democratic Party stands for will be at risk if we allow Trump back in the White House and give Republicans control of the Congress.
Former House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi also called Biden a patriotic American who she claimed as always putting the country first. Pelosi said, and I quote, "His legacy of vision, values, and leadership make him one of the most consequential presidents in American history." President Joe Biden's exit from the 2024 presidential race and his endorsement of Kamala Harris makes the path clearer for the vice president to get the Democratic nomination.
So, is there a Trump versus Harris battle on the cards for November 5th? And how does Kamala Harris stand against Trump in terms of numbers?
Polls conducted after the June 27th presidential debate showed Harris performing roughly the same as Biden against Trump, and more recent polls after the attempted assassination of Trump show similar trends. One CBS News YouGov poll conducted last week gave Trump only a 3% edge over Harris. Trump led Harris by 3 points, and that is 51% to 48%.
In another poll by YouGov conducted from July 13 to 16, that found Harris losing to Trump with a margin of 39% to 44%. And talking of swing states, a poll by 538 poll found Biden's odds of winning swing states and the Electoral College against Trump are better than Harris. That is 48% to 31%.
A Democratic polling firm, Dixon and Amandi, found Harris beating the former president 42% to 41%. It is yet to be seen how Democrats rally behind Harris after Biden's exit, but a YouGov poll found more Democrats and independents who lean Democrat prefer Biden over Harris as the nominee. That's about 47% to 32%.
His endorsement of Kamala Harris will probably ensure the first presidential nomination of a non-white female. Well, if she wins a contested convention next month, Harris would start the official election campaign with a roughly even chance of defeating Donald Trump.
Harris is not widely viewed as a strong candidate. Her performance in the 2020 Democratic primaries was weak, and she dropped out before the first caucus was held. Her first 18 months as vice president was a series of public relations disaster where she had difficulty persuading anyone that she was on top of a brief of fixing the U.S.-Mexico border crisis. Harris has led multiple initiatives, however, for the Biden administration during her political stint. She has fiercely campaigned on issues related to women's health and immigration and has taken more than a dozen trips abroad in her role.
Harris is rallying around key issues such as abortion, women's rights, gun control, more progressive criminal justice policies, and is likely to use similar talking points against Republican rival Donald Trump.
Proud to serve as Vice President of the United States with Joe Biden as President.
U.S. Secret Service Chief Kimberly Cheadle is expected to testify at a congressional hearing today.
Cheadle will appear before the Republican lawmakers who have expressed anger over security lapses that allowed a 20-year-old gunman to fire multiple shots at Trump's rally in Pittsburgh.
Ahead of the congressional hearing, U.S. Secret Service has acknowledged it denied some requests by the former president for increased security at his events prior to the assassination attempt on him at a recent rally. The law enforcement agency's acknowledgement is the strict U-turn from its previous statement after the July 13 attack. This was when U.S. Secret Service denied claims that it did not pay heed to Donald Trump's requests.
Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has called what happened a failure, while several lawmakers have called on the U.S. Secret Service chief to resign. The law enforcement agency says that Kimberly Cheadle has no intention of stepping down. U.S. Secret Service further stated that Cheadle retains the support of Democratic President Joe Biden.
U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson said that lawmakers will release details about a bipartisan congressional task force to probe the Secret Service. U.S. President Joe Biden, who is campaigning to deny Trump a second term in the White House, which he has clearly gone out of, has ordered an independent investigation. The Homeland Security Department and Congressional Committee are also investigating the security lapse.
And well, it's now time for a quick short break, but don't go anywhere. On the other side of World DNA, we'll get you a story from India, where the country's parliament's monsoon session will commence today. Fireworks are expected between the ruling NDA alliance on the NEET paper leak and other issues.
Also on the other side, the finance minister will table the economic survey today, to be followed by the union budget on Tuesday. It will be the first budget under the Prime Minister Modi-led coalition NDA government. This and more on the other side. Stay tuned.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Namaste. Hello, friends. We did Dr. Subhash Chandra show, popularly known as DSC show, for 4 years, from August 2014 to August 2018. 28 states of Bharat. Of course, we reached out to all of you in 190 countries across the world. The show was very successful. Each episode was being watched by almost 25 million people every week. For past 6 years, the demand of the show has never died down. People write to us, people ask for the show to restart again. Hence, we are beginning the show once again on All Z Network, also on WION, which is the global network channel from India. Again, thank you for your love and affection. See you soon at Subhash Chandra Show.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at yoursarthi@such.org.in. What does India want from the new government's budget? How will it respond to expectations from industry? What's in store for you, the taxpayer? Is the government using your hard-earned money wisely? WION cuts out the noise and serves you the facts. Watch continuous coverage on India Budget, Roadmap to a Developed Nation.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Faster, higher, stronger. Words that mean so much on a sporting pitch every 4 years.
ओलंपिक मेडल ने मुझे ये सिखाया कि किस तरीके से अपने आप को संभालना है.
The world's best sporting talents are assembling in Paris later this month. The quest for an Olympic medal is sport's greatest pursuit.
I think people are looking at the Olympics with a lot of hope. More than 200 countries all coming together
The Olympic Games return to the French capital after a century.
There's not really any cities that compare to it.
Catch all the build-up to the Paris Games on WION World is One.
Vielleicht nur als Impulsant.
Welcome back. You're watching WION World is One, and this is World DNA. Let's start with the headlines first.
US President Joe Biden withdraws from the presidential race after weeks of mounting pressure from Democrats. Endorses his Vice President Kamala Harris to be the Democrat nominee for the White House.
Recent YouGov poll says 79% of Democrats would support Kamala Harris as the party's nominee. Clinton's endorsed Kamala Harris, but Barack Obama holds back, saying the Democrats would name an outstanding nominee.
California Governor Gavin Newsom, seen as a key possible rival to the Vice President, endorses Kamala Harris to lead the Democratic ticket.
Gold prices rise as President Biden's decision not to seek re-election increased market uncertainty. Trump's electoral prospects strengthened, bolstering gold's appeal as a safe haven.
Monsoon session of the Indian Parliament set to get underway in New Delhi. First union budget under the new Modi-led coalition government to be presented on Tuesday.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu departs for the United States. He'll be meeting U.S. President Biden and addressing the U.S. Congress. Protests at Tel Aviv airport demanding action for release of hostages.
Xander Schauffele reigned supreme at the British Open to win his second major title in 3 months. The 30-year-old's win means that Americans have swept all 4 majors in a year for the first time since 1982.
In the biggest twist yet in the race to the White House, U.S. President Joe Biden has finally called it quits. Now, this as Democratic candidate, he won't stand for the re-election.
And he has named his Vice President Kamala Harris to lead the Democratic Party's ticket against Donald Trump. Well, this comes after weeks of pressure from trusted lieutenants, former presidents, potential donors, Democrat lawmakers and senators, and also widespread public opinion in the United States of America. The 81-year-old president finally decided on Sunday morning to pass the torch, as many call it.
President Biden tweeted a note addressed to my fellow Americans, saying he believed it to be the best interest of the party and the country to stand down and focus on his duties as president. He also said he would be addressing the nation later this week.
Minutes later, another message, this one addressed to my fellow Democrats. And he says, and I'm quoting, "Full support and endorsement for Kamala Harris to be the nominee of our party this year," unquote. Biden recalled that picking Kamala Harris as vice president in 2020 was his first decision as party nominee.
Over the last few weeks, Vice President Kamala Harris has acted as the White House's first line of defense, particularly after Biden's faltering performance in the first presidential debate against Trump. 59-year-old Harris is the first woman, first black person, and the first person of South Asian descent to serve as U.S. Vice President. Harris said she intends to earn and win the nomination and do everything in her power to unite the country to defeat Donald Trump. The Vice President and other Democratic Party leaders have expressed strong praise for the President Biden for what they called his extraordinary leadership, dedicated service.
Kamala Harris has already got endorsement from former President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, besides 79 of Democrat leaders as per a YouGov poll. But there's no clear support from former U.S. President Barack Obama, indicating a hesitation among several Democrats in accepting Harris as the party's White House nominee. Well, Obama only tweeted that Democrats will name an outstanding nominee.
It promises to be a long and winding road ahead for the Democratic Party as it heads into its national convention on the 19th of August.
For human rights and for the dignity of all people to join.
Well, U.S. President Joe Biden has officially ended his 2024 presidential campaign. In a letter posted on his campaign's Twitter account, Biden announced that he will fulfill his presidential duties until January, but will not seek re-election.
He has endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as the party's nominee. This decision follows significant pressure from prominent Democratic figures and financial donors, including actor George Clooney, who highlighted concerns about Biden's declining performance and effectiveness.
Biden's withdrawal has already led to heightened market fluctuation and economic uncertainty. Investors are reacting to the sudden shift in the political landscape with concerns about the stability of financial markets.
The new Democratic nominee will face an immediate challenge in addressing critical economic issues, including a significant rise in inflation and overall price increases since Biden took office. The timing of Biden's exit is particularly pressing given the upcoming Democratic National Convention and the need for a new candidate to quickly adapt their economic message.
With President Biden out of the race, Democrats face a fast-paced procedure to select a new contestant before the Ohio certification deadline of August 7th. The party must address mounting economic issues and restore confidence among voters and also investors alike.
Meanwhile, the Trump campaign is poised to benefit from the current instability as recent fundraising efforts have already bolstered Trump's position. The new Democratic nominee will need to swiftly formulate a strategy to counter Trump's economic critiques and stabilize both the political and financial landscapes.
And fellow citizens, I stand before you this evening with a message of confidence, strength, and hope. And thank you, Dana.
Now, Hollywood has reacted to U.S. President Joe Biden's announcement that he will halt his re-election campaign and endorse Kamala Harris for the president.
Right, Jyotsna. Many, including names such as Robert De Niro, Barbara Streisand, Lee Daniels, celebrated the decision as a heroic and selfless move for the country.
In a statement released by his PR team, Director Robert De Niro, an outspoken critic of Donald Trump, said, and I quote, "In an act of shrewd politics and selfless patriotism, Joe Biden is stepping aside to clear the path for another Democrat to become president, because there is nothing more important for our country than defeating Donald Trump at the ballot box. With respect, admiration, and affection. Thank you, Mr. President," unquote.
Director Aaron Sorkin, who previously endorsed Democratic Party nominee Mitt Romney, has now taken back his suggestion. In a fresh new post, he claimed that he would be endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee. He wrote, and I'm quoting, "I take it all back, Harris for America," unquote.
Russell Brand, who has kept a low profile for some time, took to social media and expressed his opinion. Listen to this.
Joe Biden is out of the race, as many people predicted and preempted. And what can we take from that most immediately? I suppose one thing we know for absolute certain is that the virtue and morality that undergirds that party is pretty flexible, isn't it? That guy, he's our president. Now, remember before the debate, people were somehow trying to maintain the idea that he was cogent and coherent, and the debate, in a sense, represented the pinnacle of that extraordinary lie. And now we've had an assassination attempt, Biden's resignation, the endorsement of Kamala Harris, but most of us have been watching Kamala Harris too. And of course, no claim of senility can be made, but this is not a garrulous and easy political figure. This is someone who does not seem at ease around public speaking in particular.
Avengers star Mark Ruffalo also endorsed the Democrats. He wrote, and I'm quoting, "Okay, everybody, now we have our marching orders and time to hit the trail running. No to Trump, no to the right-wing Christian religious takeover of our nation. Nothing wrong with Christianity, just should not be running a nation birthed from freedom of religion," unquote.
Another Avengers star, Jon Favreau, wrote, and I quote here, "A courageous and selfless decision. The president did what he's done for the last 4 years. He listened to the American people and put the country's interests ahead of his own. The exact opposite of Donald Trump," unquote.
Wonder Woman Linda Carter also shared similar emotions. She wrote, and I'm quoting, "Thank you for your service, President Joe Biden. You have done so much for the American people. Donald did nothing but drive us to the bottom. If you believe in America's future and want an honorable leader, you know it's time to vote Kamala Harris for president this November."
Oscar-winning star Jamie Lee Curtis also celebrated the decision. She wrote, and I quote, "I support wholeheartedly Joe Biden and his decision to step down and to endorse unreservedly Kamala Harris. She is trusted and tested, and she is a fierce advocate for women's rights and people of color. And her message is one of hope and unity for America at her time of great national divide," unquote.
Barbara Streisand, a Democratic supporter, wrote that we should be grateful for his upholding of our democracy. Biden's decision also found support from Star Trek and Star Wars actors as well. Mark Hamill and George Takei, they both thanked the president for his services and honored his decision to let Kamala Harris be a part of the race.
In recent weeks, several high-profile Hollywood names had begun calling for Biden to exit the race. Just weeks after headlining a record-breaking fundraiser for the president's re-election campaign, George Clooney wrote an opinion piece calling for Biden to end his bid. Clooney argued that the party should pick a new nominee, saying that the process would be messy, but wake up, voters in the party's favor.
Let's now take a look at some other stories from around the world. The Indian Parliament's monsoon session will commence today. Fireworks are expected between the ruling NDA alliance on the NEET paper leak row and other issues. The finance minister will table the economic survey today, to be followed by the union budget on Tuesday. It will be the first budget under the Prime Minister Modi-led coalition NDA government, and it is expected to focus on defence, agriculture and social welfare issues. The session, comprising 19 sittings, will last till August 12th.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has departed from Tel Aviv for a 6-day trip to the United States. Even as he left, hundreds of protesters turned out at the airport, continuing their demand for a deal to secure release of the hostages and bring about a truce in the war. Netanyahu will meet U.S. President Joe Biden in Washington on Tuesday and also address the U.S. Congress for the 4th time. Israel has faced a strong U.S. backlash over the rising death toll in Gaza and attacks on Palestinians in the West Bank.
The Houthis in Yemen have promised a huge retaliation against Israel for the deadly strike on Hodeidah port on Saturday. Hostilities have increased between the two sides, with Israel saying it shot down a missile launched from Yemen, while Houthis claim to have fired several missiles at the Israeli city of Eilat.
The Israeli military said that its Arrow 3 missile defense system shot down the surface-to-surface projectile before it crossed the Israeli airspace. The Houthi spokesperson described the strike as open war. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is set to present a budget focused on infrastructure and long-term reforms to drive economic growth.
But have you ever wondered, where does the government earn money and where does it spend? Well, our next report tells you exactly that. Take a look.
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will present the government's budget on July 23rd, with a focus on infrastructure and long-term reforms to drive growth. However, beyond the numbers, it's important to understand, how does the government earn its income? The budget reveals that borrowings and other liabilities constitute the highest source of income for the centre at 28%. Income tax and GST each contribute 18%, while corporation tax accounts for 17% of the total income. Non-tax receipts including rent and fines make up 7%, followed by union excise duties at 5%, customs at 4%, and non-debt capital receipts at 1%. On the expenditure side, 20% goes towards paying interest and an equal amount is given to states in the form of taxes and duties. Central sector schemes account for 16% of the total expenditure, other expenditures at 9%, defence and centrally sponsored schemes at 8% each, and subsidies at 6%. Minister Sitharaman emphasised the profound positive transformation in the Indian economy over the last decade. It will be interesting to see how can the budget support this transformation. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Well, the government is looking at surging vegetable prices just before it unveils the budget.
Now, there is a shortage of vegetables with a key ingredient in Indian kitchens. Tomatoes, seeing a significant supply shortfall. Take a look at this next report for more.
A sharp rise in tomato prices in India highlights ongoing global challenges with inflation impacting consumers worldwide. Severe weather conditions, including heavy rains and flooding across India, have disrupted tomato supplies. This has compounded existing supply chain issues exacerbated by economic uncertainties. Tomatoes form a key part of Indian cooking, and a surge in its price will weigh on households across the country. This inflationary pressure isn't isolated to tomatoes alone. Other essential commodities in the kitchens across the country, like onions and potatoes, have also seen price increases. The surge in prices extends to various green vegetables, affecting household budgets and consumer purchasing power both in India and globally. They bring tears to both the eyes and the pockets. For India, facing the inflationary pressures just ahead of the union budget poses a significant challenge. The government must navigate these economic headwinds while attempting to sustain growth and manage public expectations. Interventions may be necessary to stabilize prices and ensure food security. That could potentially impact fiscal policies and allocations in the upcoming budget. As India prepares to present its budget amidst these economic realities, the focus will be on addressing price rises effectively while fostering sustainable economic growth. The outcomes will only impact domestic stability but also resonate across global economic landscapes. Business Bureau, WION, World is One.
In the upcoming week, global markets are poised to react to several key economic indicators and events across major regions.
Well, beginning in the United States of America, all eyes are on the release of the advance estimates for Q2 2024 GDP growth, expected to show major improvement from Q1's 1.4% growth. Well, this data will influence Federal Reserve's policy decisions amidst ongoing concerns over inflation and also economic recovery.
Turning to Europe and Japan, investors will closely monitor the flash numbers for manufacturing and services PMI in July. These indicators will provide insights into the health of these economies, particularly amidst ongoing challenges posed by supply chain disruptions and pandemic-related uncertainties.
In Asia, India will be in focus. The government is slated to introduce several important bills, with the budget taking the center stage. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is expected to table the economic report on Monday. The government is scheduled to present the budget on July 23rd. The anticipation is high as the new NDA-led coalition government prepares to unveil its fiscal policies, while the market sentiment in India will also be influenced by corporate earnings releases from key players across sectors like banking, FMCG and tech. This will provide a clearer picture of corporate health amid evolving market conditions.
Overall, with volatility heightened by monthly futures and options expiry, global investors will navigate a landscape shaped by economic data releases and policy decisions.
Let's now take a look at all the news from the world of technology. As per Microsoft, the global outage that created chaos on industries from airline to broadcasting and brought daily operations to a standstill and also affected nearly 8.5 million devices. The Friday outage impacted less than 1% of all Windows machines worldwide. The tech meltdown was caused by a CrowdStrike software update that triggered system problems, which eventually grounded flights, disrupted broadcast, and cut off access to services like healthcare and banking.
A ransomware attack has shut down the computer system of the Superior Court of Los Angeles County. As per officials, the attack took place on Friday and was not related to the faulty CrowdStrike software update that affected airlines, hospitals, and banks worldwide. Upon discovering the attack, the court disabled its computer network systems and kept them shut over the weekend. A preliminary investigation has shown no evidence that users' data has been compromised. The Superior Court of Los Angeles County serves 10 million residents over 36 courthouses and is the largest unified superior court in the United States.
The Indian government has asked tech giants like Google, Meta and X to come up with ways to verify the age of children on their platforms. A report says the government has advised these platforms to explore their own tech-enabled methods to comply with the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. Previously, the IT ministry considered using Aadhaar card or DigiLocker for age verification of users, but the methods were found to be impractical. Aadhaar cards are unique identification numbers issued to Indian residents, whereas DigiLocker is a digital storage service for important documents provided by the Indian government.
Let's take a look at stories that are making headlines in the world of sports. Jander Schauffele has pulled off the challenge of Justin Rose to win the 152nd Open Championship. The American hit a bogey-free 6 under 65 to finish on 9 under to clear off his playing partner